Okay, just wait. Okay. So thank you again for letting me interview you. I really appreciate your time. Could you just like quickly, just for students who haven't taken your class, could you just introduce yourself? And since the semester is already over, maybe you can say what class you're planning to teach in the next semester.
Okay. Um, well, that's a little tricky one. This is my last semester.
What?
Hmm.
Professor?
So I'm not teaching any more classes. This is my last one.
Really?
Hmm.
Oh my gosh.
I'm retiring.
Oh my gosh.
I've been teaching at Loney College for 21 years. And then before that, I had a career for 20 years before that. So I've been, working for 40 years and I've now reached the retirement age. But the main motivation for that is just because I just became a grandfather. And so I need to
Mm.
do some help with family and everything like that. So I can't work full time. I have to move actually. So I'm moving to
Mm.
San Diego. So I'm not sure how to answer that question. I guess just for advice for if it were me, if I were teaching another class and a student was going to take my class, because there may be some similarities between what I would do and other teachers would do, I would say that if you want to take a computer science course, you really have to have a genuine interest in computer science. I believe that to be true. I don't think it's the kind of a job where you can take training and do it just because you think it's a good thing to do if you don't really have a personal interest in it, partly because of what I mentioned about the time commitment. For me, I'm a kind of a slow learner. So in order for me to absorb all the details, I had to spend a large amount of time on it. And I had to be willing to commit basically half-time job every single week on just learning computer science courses because they don't come easy. Whereas I mentioned a few other courses to me, like say earth science or history or English, were not so challenging for me because I didn't have as much need to say study all the elements of it. They were more like general education courses to me. So I'm satisfied with just a kind of a cursory understanding. I'm not saying that would be true for everyone, but for computer science, it was really vitally important for me to have a really deep understanding of it. And that requires a huge time commitment. So I would say any student that wanted to take my course, I was usually expecting them to have the same kind of commitment. And I know that's not always true, especially if you're taking a CS 102 course, the introduction, then you may be just doing it to explore if you have an interest in computer science. But once you finish that course, if you take CS 116 or 118 or 124, you've already made a decision that computer science is a passion, or you wouldn't take those courses. That's my belief. So then I would have a stronger expectation that the students in my course will share that kind of same enthusiasm for it. So my advice would just be, just for anyone that wants to take my course or another secondary course in computer science, think about whether that's really what you want to do. As I mentioned to you before, life is too short to do things that you're not interested in, right? And I know that's maybe a slightly different way of thinking than some other people have, because there are people that believe computer science might lead to a good job, so therefore I'll just take it kind of like training to learn a skill, but not be interested in it. However, I advise against that. I don't think that's going to really work, because computer science is going to require a lifelong commitment. It's not going to be something where you can train for 3 years and then you have a job and then you're done. It's not like that. You'll be continually training throughout your entire career at the same level as school requires. So even when you're working, you still need to be studying it 12 hours a week beyond your work, because the field is so rapidly evolving and changing that almost everything you learn is going to be outmoded very, very soon anyway. So you just have to be in a constant mode. Maybe I'm talking too much. I don't know if this is the kind of answer you would like, but
Yeah, no, that was perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Like just in class too, when you share things about like the industry, how that like life or that workload would be like. And I also have an insight now that it is kind of like school, and you have to still put that work and that dedication, even after college. So
Yeah.
thank you for that answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also want to ask, where did your interest or passion for computer science come from? I remember you briefly said in class like you also have a master's degree, right, in
Well,
computer science. Is that
yes,
right?
master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, if you want to go back to the beginning a little bit, I'll try not to be too long about it. But my primary passion in the world is actually music. So when I
Mm.
graduated from, say, high school, they would always ask you at that time, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to play trumpet." And they said, "Well, okay, what kind of careers do you think there are for trumpet players?" And I had gone to talk to the leader, the president of the union of music, the musicians union, at one point in San Francisco. That was not when I was in high school, but later. And I asked him what he thought about a career playing trumpet. And he just started laughing. He said, "Oh, you might as well forget it." He said, there's about 600 trumpet players in San Francisco, and there's only about 6 jobs. So if you're the best out of the 600, then yeah, you can do it. Otherwise, he advises against it. And this is professional musician. So even though that was much later, but when I was in high school, they didn't ask me that. They asked me, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Play trumpet." So I did actually make several attempts at being a professional musician. But just like the head of the musicians union said, it's really tough. You have to really be the top. That's the only way you're going to do it, because the competition is just unbelievable. And I am not there. So I'm more like I love it. I love to do it, but I don't excel in it. Right. So I was kind of listless, and that caused me to drift for a while, because I felt like, gee, I'm not realizing my dream here. What am I going to do? So I was very lucky because I found a part-time job, a half-time job, working as a bookkeeper in a small church up in Berkeley. And the the administrator of the church said that we would like to take all of our books and records and try putting them on a computer to see if that would help us with our business aspects. Churches have business aspects too, right? They have to count the money and pay the bills. And so I said, well, I don't know, I'm not too interested, but I guess I'll try it out, right? So the administrator brought in a computer, an old IBM PC, and sat it down and said, "Okay, let's begin the process." And I knew nothing about what to do, and neither did he. And we read some books about it, tried to figure it out. And the job I was doing as a bookkeeper was taking me about 20 hours a week. By the time we got finished automating that process into a spreadsheet on the computer, it only took me 5 hours a week. So it really opened my mind. I said, my gosh, this thing, I was able to be way more productive and have more fun and have an easier job of doing this work with the assistance of the computer. Now, that had a couple of positive effects on my life. One was that it meant that now, instead of spending 20 hours, I only had to spend 5. Now that was sort of scary, because does that mean I'm only going to get paid for 5 hours? And I was so lucky. My manager at that time said, "No, I'll tell you what, you really helped me do this. I'm still going to pay you for 20 hours. And that other 15 hours a week, you can do whatever you want." Can you believe that? I mean, how many people in a job would do that? It's just a stroke of luck on my part. So I thought to myself, okay, why don't I go try to learn more about how the computer is able to accomplish this work, basically. How does a computer work? And that was the beginning of my second passion. So music was my first one, and my second one was trying to understand, how does a computer work? And in order to do that, I started taking courses at the local college, which in my case that time was Cal State Hayward, and gradually built up more and more interest in it, and was able to still work at my job, which increased a little bit from 5 hours because I did other things, but that's okay. I was working about maybe 20 hours a week at times, and then going to school the rest of the time, because of the generosity of the administrator of the church where I was working, and because I just found it interesting. So it became a second passion for me. I guess that's how I got started in it.
Wow, that is really, really cool. Oh,
I'm
wow.
so grateful that he did that. I don't think very many businesses would ever agree to basically pay you to go to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really wonderful.
Wow. Yeah, that's really awesome. it's very interesting how like your life work can kind of come out of your passions and like your hobbies.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting. I always hear stories about that too, where like someone I asked someone, like, how did you get into your current line of work? And they're like, oh, like I never even thought about this. Like, it's always like something else that led me to here. So
Hmm.
that was very interesting. Yeah, and I guess since you shared a lot for me, and I think for the other students in my class to hear and learn from you, I guess kind of just want to wrap this up. And since you said you're retiring, which I did not know, um, what was your, I guess, favorite memory of like being a teacher? Like out of all your years of teaching, could you maybe narrow it down to one if you can?
Hmm. Wow, that's a pretty tough question. I never really thought too much about that at this point. Like, I mean, there's so many positive memories. So one of the things that certainly stands out is when certain students would just amaze you with their incredible skill. For example, one of my students in my assembly language course was a Vietnamese woman named Huynh, and
Mm.
and she just totally amazed me. I mean, basically, she did 10 times more than I was asking for any lab. I would say, can you do a lab that documents the way the stack works inside the computer when you're calling functions? And most students would just kind of do a fairly simple cursory idea about that. And she would do a 20-page document with diagrams and illustrations and everything showing exactly how it worked. So I learned from her. As it turned out later, I was unexpected to find out that she then became the valedictorian of the class. So it wasn't just my class. She was basically 4.0 in everything, and she got top honors at Ohlone College when she graduated valedictorian. So that was like really a very powerful memory for me, to have seen that, to seen it. But it's not just her either. It wasn't like that's why I said it's hard for me to choose, because there's been dozens of situations like that in my 20 years where I would be amazed at the amount of dedication and skill that people will rise to, you could say, right? So,
Mhm.
but that was one
Yeah,
that stood out in my mind.
yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know you're not going to be teaching next semester, but one thing that I'll take away from you personally is like dedication, and commitment, time commitment, right? Like, putting your all into something. That's how you'll succeed. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's the one thing that I've learned from you. Most important. Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor. I appreciate it. And thank you for letting me interview you.
Sure, you're welcome. I'd be
Yeah,
happy to.
thank
Thank you for
you.
asking me.